welcome to the Boston Ramesh channel. Today is day 21 of my ServiceNow Application Developer certification journey. In today's video, I'll be going through scripting in ServiceNow section of module 4. I'll be going through a few notes I have collected as part of this section, plus I will go through the labs that I need to complete. All right, so let's look at scripting in ServiceNow. This is going to be a very quick review as I have learned this scripting in my scripting fundamentals course. So this is a very lightweight review on whatever I have learned so far. Scripting will be used to customize or extend existing functionality, and then it will be used to enhance a user experience. And scripting is divided into two types: client side and server side. Client side is basically, executes on the browser, and the browser means you have user experience that is supposed to be enhanced. So you have to make sure that the user is getting a good experience. That means you need to have a control on the user experience, and the client side scripts basically take care of that. And from a server side scripting perspective, server side basically means you are managing the data, or you are executing some backend scripts to say, for example, send emails or write logs, run a workflow, a lot of things that we do in the server side. And some examples why we need to write scripts. What is the need for that? So some examples, like, as I said, send emails, write logs, validate data, prompt users on the form, and then add widgets, so on and so forth. Now looking at the client side and server side, let's do a little bit double click on this. Client scripts, we need to understand why we need client scripts, what happens, and when do we do this, when does the client scripts execute, and what type of APIs are available. So client scripts are used to modify choice list options. Again, these are just a few examples. Set one field in response to another in real time. Hide and show form sections. Display an alert. Make fields mandatory. And then hide fields. Pretty much on every form, these are the minimum requirements. And then what happens when you run these client scripts? It will implement the needed functionality by writing the scripts, the custom scripts. And then when exactly these client scripts executes, there are three events that happens when you load a form in the ServiceNow: on load, on change, or on submit. That means when a form loads, something needs to happen, then you write a script for that. And on change, if a field changes after the form is loaded, then you write the script or the logic in this particular event. And what needs to happen when you submit a form, that's when you write this script during the on submit event. Now, ServiceNow provides different types of APIs, but just for the example, glide form and glide user. These are the most frequently used or most useful APIs that as the application developer we use. Glide form, it has the full control of the form. So whatever the form field you wanted to get, you just get the current form, this is called g_form, and then you get all the values. And then glide user is basically the user object of the currently logged in session, so that we know, what is the user name or what is the user role. Can we show this message to the user or not? And a lot of things that we can do by knowing who is the logged in user. And client script APIs are you know executed in two scopes. One is global and another one is application. Basically we call them scope, but basically application scope. So what is the difference between the global and scope? Global is basically this script is available for all the applications, including the base application, the ServiceNow. And when we say scope, this is specifically available or specifically used for a specific custom application. So custom applications scripts are not reachable to other custom application. However, global script can be used or available for all the scoped applications. Now we are done with the client scripts. Let's look at the UI policies. This is a very simple, lightweight type of client-side option here. We can call them client-side scripts, but sometimes I feel like UI policies are very lightweight in terms of how we can configure and how we can use. UI policies are basically used to control the form behavior. That means fields on the forms. For example, if you want to make a field mandatory, the UI policy is the way to go. And most important thing is UI policies have faster load times when compared to client scripts. However, all the times in a sequence of execution, when you load a form, client scripts loads first and then UI policies load second or executes second. That means UI policies always execute after the client scripts are executed. That means whenever we have multiple UI policies and multiple client scripts are made or associated to a particular form, then we need to know what is the sequence of these executions. If a UI policy is executed at the third in the sequence, and then the client script executes in the second sequence, then we need to know what happens in the second sequence and then third in the sequence. Otherwise, you will be overwriting what you intended to implement. And let's see the comparison between, this is going to be a very quick one. So this is on the ServiceNow product documentation. So nothing that uh, that you have to research. You just go there and look for client scripts versus UI policies. You will get it. Very interestingly, if you see UI policies cannot be available when you wanted to execute on form save, submit, or update. Also, another interesting example that you need to know in the client script, when you go for on change event, you have the control of, or at least your script will know what is the previous value of a particular field when it's changed and what is the current value of the field when it changes. But that information is not available for the UI policies. So in those situations, UI policies cannot be used. Now let's move on to the server-side scripts. There are different types of server-side scripts, and these are the listed here. Business rules, which is the most important thing we need to understand, the business rules. Workflow or flow, scheduled jobs, script actions, access control, script includes, and UI actions. Let's look at the business rules. This is the most important thing. And these business rules uh, are executed because they are server-side scripts. They execute whenever there is a trigger on the database access. That means whether you are querying a database, when you are creating a new record, when you are updating a new record, or when you are deleting a record, right? So insert, update, delete, query. And how, when, that's how we need to know. So, and there is again, you need to know when a record is inserted, what needs to happen before the insert is happened or after the insert is happened. Or when you query, should that happen before the display or the after the display, so on and so forth. Now looking at other, items, this is pretty much, given here, workflow. Whenever there is a workflow, what should happen? It will trigger when the condition is met. And for the scheduled job, it will trigger based on a schedule. And then for script actions, when events are triggered. And from access control, when based on an operation, it will fire. And then script includes when it is called. If a script we have to include, then it will fire when we call them. And from a UI actions perspective, triggers when a user clicks on a widget. One interesting API I wanted to capture here, because there are a lot of APIs in the server side, but I wanted to just capture this one, G underscore scratchpad. So the intent of having the G underscore scratchpad is usually when you execute a server side script, it doesn't have any information, have any clue what's happening on the client side, and client side doesn't have information what's happening on the server side. So if there is a query that is pulling the data of a particular record, and then if a client script have to use it, then it's an easy way is to transfer or update the scratchpad, which is nothing but a temporary space for that session, for that location, to transfer that information, so that client script can actually access this G scratchpad information that is holding the information that is coming from the server execution, and then use it. That's very useful, and then it's very important for a developer to know. Now that concludes the basic information that I have gathered part of this module, and then I will go ahead and start on the lab of creating a UI policy and creating a client script. So in this lab, there are actually two labs. The first one is to create a UI policy. So this UI policy is for the loaner request form that you see on the screen. The UI policy action will make the other field visible and mandatory when the condition tests true. So right now, this form does not have a field called other. Other should be below the depot. So I will have to add a new field called other. And when a user selects the depot location as other, then that field should become a mandatory. That means the user cannot save this form without providing a specific depot name. So I have created a UI policy. The UI policy is named as make other field visible and mandatory. As you see, the UI policy does not have a name field, so short description will be the identity of this UI policy. As you see, when to apply, this is the condition builder, is when the depot value is other. That is what we were talking about, when the depot value is other. So to execute this, I have added a new field on the form called other. So in here we have, when I selected the run scripts, we'll have two blocks here. When the execute if true, that means when the condition becomes true, then we'll show where will you pick up the loaner. That means when the user selects the value in the depot, the choice as other, then this will show under that other field. And then if the user reselects a different one, then that message should not be displayed. So let me go ahead and quickly test it and show you. So here, the UI policy is going to execute when I select the other. So when I select the other field is displayed and it is mandatory. And then it says, where will you pick up the loaner? If I don't give any value, then it will show an error. It will show an error saying that, obviously the start date and end date and the requested for should be entered because they are mandatory fields, but other is also part of the mandatory fields on this form. Now, if I select any other city, then the the other field should be hidden. And now if I select the other again, then it should be the same thing. So it should be a consistent view for the user. In this next step, I will be creating a client script. And this client script, let me read out what exactly the requirement is here. This is again for the loan request application. The client side script should set one field in response to another and make a field read only, and then pass data to the client side from the server and use the data to auto populate a field, and then business rule to perform date validation. So these are the lab objectives. That means this lab includes one client side script, one business rule, one client script and another business rule. So let me go through each one by one and see how that works. So I have created a client script. This is on change. This client script executes on the event on change. That means, and it's also because whenever we um, write a script for on change event, we have to say which field, because without that there is no purpose in putting an on change event. So whenever there is a change in the configuration item, that is the one right here, then it should do something. That's what we are trying to do. So what we are trying to do here is to put some uh, other field with a different value based on the conditions. So what we are trying to do here is, whenever there is a configuration item that contains BlackBerry or iPhone or Android, then it should say, if it is a BlackBerry, then it should be iPhone or Android, it should be a mobile phone in the item type right here. This is item type. Then if it is a MacBook, then you should say laptop. Right now, by default, this form is loaded as a laptop, but if I just go back here. But if I change it to, for example, MacBook, any MacBook in the list, then it should automatically change to laptop, right? That's expected. But if I go to BlackBerry and enter and select a BlackBerry, then automatically you see it changes to mobile phone. So that is the expected behavior here. This client script is handling those expectations. Now the next item is to create a business rule. Business rule is to show that how to use the scratchpad values. So as we have seen that scratchpad is basically a temporary location where a query result coming from the server can be stored temporarily in a session so that the client script can actually access it. That's what we're trying to do here. So basically this business rule is going to execute when it will execute when the display happens, when the form display happens, and then there are no actions per the advanced here. So this is where the script look at the requested for city. That means whoever we select here, say for example a profile, then that profile's city and country code should be used to populate this field called location to be used, right? So that's what we are looking at, city and country of that profile. And that is what we are trying to update the scratchpad here, city and country. Now, after this, I created a client script, in this case, loaner location. So this is a client script that is loading, that is executed when the form is loaded on load event. So that means when a load event happens, automatically set location to be used, field value based on user location. So basically what user location is coming from the requested for should be updated to location to be used. If city and country values both are available part of the scratchpad, because it is available for the session, then this client script will be using those values to run through these if conditions here. So if both values are available, use the city, comma country. If only city value is available, just display the city. And if it is only country, just the country. And at the end, show the field message saying that values set automatically, you may override by editing. Okay. So that is what we're going to do. Look at this. The user that I have selected is Abraham Lincoln. And then reason why it doesn't show up here is because it's not on display, right? So what I need to do is I go back here and then look at this one. I'm going to change this back to somebody else and come back here because it's a little bit tricky here. Able tutor, save it. and then go back to Abraham Lincoln, because I went into the user profile Abraham Lincoln and updated the city and country code for this user because it was empty, because I wanted to test it. Now this is the list view where we have requested for and location to be used is empty. That's because that is what we are looking at to be automatically populated, but that will only execute when we load the form, right? So when we load the form right here. So we loaded the form and the business rule executed, and it put those two values, country code and the city, in the scratchpad. And this client script onload event, it took that value and updated here. San Diego, which is the city, and US is the country code. And then the script that we said to put that field message said value set automatically. You may override by editing. That's what we said here. Now the final business rule is to check the start and end dates. So here what we are looking at is start date and end date. The start date is basically start underscore date, that is internal value. End underscore date is the again the internal value. What we are trying to do is to validate if the end date is less than the start date, throw an error and ask the user to validate and enter the correct future date, because the start date should be uh, smaller than the end date. So even after throwing that error, what we are trying to do is to make this end date empty so that the user can select the correct future date. So that is the code here. So this business rule again, before insert or update. So this is the execution, that is the condition that we are uh, configuring here. This business rule will execute whenever that new loaner request, the record is inserted or updated, because that's when we are catching that error. That condition is basically saying that if the current end date, current means the current sessions object, which is the record that we are looking at on this table, saying that the end date is less than the current start date, then end date must be later than the start date. All right, so let's quickly test it. So right now, this is start date is 24, and then end date is 29, which is looks pretty good. That's the usual thing, but I try to put this date to a previous date, which is 23. 24 is the current date, the start date, but 23 is less than that. So what should happen? It should throw an error. It should throw an error saying that end date must be later than start date. As we said, end date must be later than start date. But also this field is now empty. That means the user has to select it because that is an invalid update. So that is what we are looking at, all the client scripts and business rules, and even the business rules. We have seen the scratchpad used in this case to get some values from the server and pass it on to the client script. So 2 client scripts, 2 business rules, and 1 UI policy is part of this lab, which was very good. I think I like that lab, which covers a lot of ground here in terms of the scripting. That's the end of the module 4 video of day 21. I hope you like this video, and hope you can join me in my next video on day 22. Until then, bye.